What's going on, y'all? Today I'm bringing you guys my first run review in the Adidas Boston 13s. I finally got them in my hands and tried them out. And honestly, a little bit disappointed, which I'll get more into in the first run review. And I'm probably going to return these as they kind of flared up my Achilles. But with that being said, let's get right into the first run review. So to preface this, I did run a 6 mile run for the first time in this shoe. And I guess that was more than enough for me to see that maybe this shoe just wasn't built for me. So if you're interested in the Adidas Boston 13 and you're kind of looking at a bunch of different reviews, this might be a little bit more of a slightly negative review, but it's good to know a little bit of the negative reviews and the positive reviews when you are considering purchasing a running shoe, in my opinion. So this was my experience in the Adidas Boston 13, starting out with the outsole. So the outsole, honestly, didn't really have any problems with the outsole. I was running on the road in dry weather conditions in California, so didn't really have any problems. Adidas usually kills it with their outsoles, especially with that Continental rubber outsole. In my opinion, I do have the Boston 12s, and I think that the Boston 12s outsole is a little bit better than this one just from a first run in this shoe. Even though this is a Continental rubber outsole, I just feel like the traction pattern isn't as good as maybe last year's model, but I think you're still going to get great grip. I was sticking to the ground like glue with these. It's just not at that level of the Boston 12. As for durability, not even going to touch on that. I only ran 6 miles in this shoe, so we're going to kind of skip over that. But overall, the outsole I think is going to last a long time if you're interested in this shoe, as well as you're going to get good traction in this shoe. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to hold up in worse weather conditions than what I ran in, and I was running in basically perfect conditions. So with that being said, the outsole on the Boston 13 was fantastic. Now, moving on to the cushion setup of the Boston 13, we have a full-length Light Strike Pro with some carbon fiber rods in the shoe. So if you guys didn't know, I also didn't really pay too close attention, but Adidas does put rods in their shoe instead of a full length plate. So that's just something that they do to differentiate themselves, I guess, from the competition. You get 36 millimeters of stack height in the heel, dropping to 30 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot of Light Strike Pro, giving it a 6 millimeter heel to toe drop. How did this setup feel, especially compared to last year's? I think it felt a little bit better than last year's, in my opinion. I felt like it was a little bit more cushioned. I believe there is a little bit more cushion in the forefoot in the Boston 13 versus the Boston 12, but it wasn't anything crazy. I did feel like I got a slight bounce, and it was very comfortable, especially at slower paces and while I was walking around in the shoe. When I started picking up the pace in the shoe, the Light Strike Pro kind of firms up a little bit and gives you that kind of nice, satisfying, responsive feel, but it doesn't feel too bouncy and it doesn't feel like it's helping you too much. With regards to the carbon rods within the shoe, I felt that they were there, but they weren't as obtrusive as maybe the Brooks Hyperion Max 3 or some of the more aggressive race day shoes, which I think is a good thing for a plated trainer. I don't think that it's good to have such an aggressive rocker or an aggressive plate in a plated training shoe, but that's just me personally. So the Boston 13, if you're looking for a more chill plated daily trainer, I think that this setup is going to work really well for you. I do think that there is enough cushion in this setup also to do long runs. I personally didn't do a long run in them, but just feeling them on foot, it does feel like there is a lot of cushion in this shoe. It's not overly cushioned, kind of like some of the other super trainers are, but there is definitely enough stack height to maybe push this shoe to 13, 15, 17 miles. I don't know if I would run a full marathon in these, but I definitely think that if I was a little bit lighter, I think you could. I also think that you could do a 20-mile run in these because they do feel cushioned enough, in my opinion. So overall, the Light Strike Pro felt really good. I thought that the carbon rods also did their thing without being too overly aggressive. The rocker in this shoe isn't super aggressive either. So overall, I think that this is a pretty versatile setup when it comes to cushioning if you want to run faster or slower in the shoe while still being able to kind of train your muscles and prevent injury. So overall, I think that the cushion setup in this shoe is decent, especially for the price of $160. A lot of brands with their plated trainers like the Saucony Endorphin Speeds, the Nike Zoom Flies, a lot of them have increased their prices of their plated daily trainers, and I think Adidas has kept this at $160, which I think is a pretty good deal for what you're getting. So keep that in mind when you're comparing this shoe to maybe other shoes that you're considering on the market. Now, last but not least, moving on to the upper of the Adidas Boston 13. So this was probably my least favorite part of last year's model, the Boston 12. I thought that shoe had some potential. The traction was good. The cushion was decent. but then that fit and the upper were horrible. This year, I think that they did improve upon the upper and the fit, but I still don't think that it's the best setup in my opinion, and that's kind of the reason why I feel like I'm going to return them, as well as I felt like this is partly the reason why I kind of had an Achilles flare up. Obviously, it could be a combination of different things like overtraining, running too fast, running in the wrong shoes. I felt like my Achilles started to hurt a little bit when I was running a lot in the Adidas Adizero Evo SLs, but it only kind of came back when I ran in the Boston 13s. I don't know exactly what it was, whether that was the cushion setup or whether that was the upper. But this year's upper setup, I think, is a little bit more traditional compared to the Boston 12s, which is a good sign. This material that they have on the upper is kind of like a plasticky mesh. It's pretty rigid, but it is pretty breathable. Like I can see a lot of light shining through, which means that there are perforations that are working in the shoe. The lockdown in the forefoot as well as the midfoot was actually pretty decent. I was pretty surprised, especially compared to last year's. In my opinion, these did run true to size. Now I do have a wider than average foot size, but I did get my regular size 12 in these, not wide, not narrow, and they did fit me pretty well. The heel lockdown was a little bit tricky. I had to do the runner's loop in the shoe to get a good heel lockdown, but without the runner's loop, especially if you're a heel striker, this part of the heel kind of flares out a lot when you step. So I would recommend doing the heel lock and just basically trying on the shoe before you buy it, just because heel lock is such an important aspect of a running shoe. You don't want to feel like your running shoe's coming off while you are running, or you don't want to feel like your foot is moving around in the shoe too much, which I didn't feel. I do want to note that the laces did run pretty small or pretty short, especially when I did the runner's loop. So it made it pretty uncomfortable to do the runner's loop and to get that tight lockdown in the heel. And I felt like I really had to cinch the laces down to kind of get the fit that I wanted. But overall, I think that the upper was decent. It's nothing special, nothing crazy, nothing super premium, but at the price point of $160, I think that they did a very good job with the upper as well as the fit, especially compared to last year's Boston 12. So overall, price at $160. I mean, I did only do one run in this shoe, and I am returning this shoe because it did flare my Achilles injury, or just kind of like a slight, I don't know, like a tweak where my Achilles kind of hurts, and I don't want to take any chances. I've noticed that it only happens when I run in the Adizero Evo SL and this shoe. When I've been running my long runs or just my regular runs in every other brand or every other type of model, like my Achilles doesn't really flare up. So not to blame Adidas, but I kind of see a pattern going there, and I don't really want to kind of test the limits. I don't want to kind of wear these on long runs to kind of find out, because I am training for the Long Beach Marathon. So overall, I don't want to give this Adidas Boston 13 a negative review, because honestly, the traction, midsole, as well as the upper all are pretty solid, but maybe just don't work the best for me. So keep that into consideration when you are purchasing the Boston 13s. If you do have some Achilles injuries and you kind of want to steer clear because of this review, I mean, I don't really blame you. This is just my personal experience in the shoe. But then again, we're all different. We all have different preferences. We all have different biomechanics and foot shapes and stuff. So if you are interested in the Boston 13, I do actually think that this is a great value, especially compared to similar spec and similar models out on the market for other brands. This shoe does come at a value at $160, which is kind of crazy to say because, you know, running shoes are getting so expensive, but these do come in 10 to 15 to even $20 cheaper than the competition for what it gives you. So make sure you consider the Boston 13s in the future. Also, this is not sponsored or anything. I did buy this shoe with my own money, so Adidas is not paying me to say any of that, but I do think that for the specs and what the materials they give you, I think that this shoe is a decent value at $160, but it's just not for me, so I'm going to be returning these. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching my first run review on the Boston 13. I'm a little sad that these didn't really work for me. I was kind of excited to run in these and to put more miles on them, but yeah, with injuries, you know how that is. Like, I don't want to really risk it. And I've only noticed it when I run in these Adidas shoes. So that's going to pretty much wrap up the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.